Well, hello, Belong Group leaders and groups that are watching this. You're doing such a wonderful job. Thank you for taking the lead here. Um, One of the reasons that we're doing these brief trainings is our desire is that we would see the importance of our groups, not only as us coming together, but as us growing together and seeing each of our groups become more and more effective at being a family of God. Kind of in the whole vision of this message is trying to teach how can we as a church become a family that everyone would want to join. And the focus of that is our belong groups. If those groups get better, if we develop a culture in our groups where people are safe and sharing and growing, it's going to change the whole future of our church. Today we want to talk a little bit about this idea of leading a life-changing discussion. Our teaching is actually on courageous discussions. And what does it take for a discussion to really be life-changing? I sometimes see a group leader as someone who's kind of like leading an orchestra. The real key to being a great life group leader isn't so much that you could teach or what you could share, but that you're able to bring out the instruments in the orchestra and create a life-giving discussion that at the end people leave and say, my goodness, I feel different because of that discussion that we had. So let me just give you a few thoughts on facilitating a life-changing discussion. I want to read to you this verse in 1 Timothy 1, 3-5, and it kind of reminds us what it takes to, where we're trying to go in our discussions. And Paul is writing to them. He says, I want to write to all of you that you may charge some that they would not teach other doctrines or give heed to fables and endless genealogies, which only create disputes rather than creating edification, which leads to more faith. Now the purpose of all of the commandments is love, flowing from a pure heart with a good conscience and from a sincere faith, from which some have strayed and have turned aside to idle talk. What I see about leading a life-changing discussion is having everybody on board with the purpose. Basically, Paul gives three purposes, and I believe these three purposes fit so beautifully in what we're trying to do in a life group discussion. The number one purpose is to build people up, to share things which produce edification. Number two purpose is to bind people together. He says the goal of everything is at the end that we would love each other more. And then the third purpose is that we would bring people into a greater awareness of how God is trying to work in their life. We've said it this way, that the goal of life group, again, is not a sermon, but is an application. People becoming aware, oh, that's how the truth impacts my life. One of the things a life group leader all the time is trying to bring the discussion around to is, how will you change because of what we've just read? I find this is the most challenging part. I find that the things that Paul was warning about are things that are easy to happen in a discussion. Number one, it's easy for discussions to end up in idle talk. People saying a lot of things but not really sharing things that matter. Or it's easy for discussions to end up in disputes about unimportant matters, or even disputes about doctrines that don't really change people's lives. The natural course of discussions often goes into rabbit trails, or what do you think about the millennium? Or what do you think about water baptism for babies? Or things that really aren't going to change people's life. So how do leaders facilitate life-changing discussions? Number one, they continually bring the focus back. What we are trying to accomplish here. They say today, what we're trying to accomplish is being closer to one another, becoming more sincere in our faith, really learning how to open up and change. by asking people for prayer and accountability. That's where we're trying to go. The other thing we see here is Paul saying, make sure you keep the boundaries where they need to be. Don't let people get off track or take the group off track. One of the things we hope to do today also is to just give out a little questionnaire. This is about 3 weeks into the campaign. And to really ask people, how is our group doing? How could we be better? When it comes to boundaries, one of the things that we have to be aware of is to just make people aware of things that get off track in a group. One of the ways I'm going to actually give in a life group discussion question is to help us see how we tend naturally maybe to react in ways that get groups off. I like to describe this as the goal of a great group is flying together like a geese. But what I find is that in the natural, we don't all act like geese. Geese automatically want to flow, and they want to encourage, and they want to grow as a team. But many of us function as maybe other animals. I was going to mention some animals that don't work well in a group. For example, cats. Cats really don't care what's going on in your life. They just think about themselves. Skunks, I won't say too much about skunks, but skunks let whatever bad mood they have spread to the whole group. Another kind of animal that doesn't do well in a life group is a rabbit, because they're always running off on different trails. And then you have the turtle, who's always going into their shell and doesn't really want to be very vulnerable. One of the things I like to do in a group is just to say, what is it that you might naturally react to that would take this group off? Anybody here tend to want to be a skunk today? Anyone tend here to want to be a rabbit today? How can we all be more geese? So maybe that's a discussion that you can have. Just a few ideas on how to facilitate life-changing discussions.